All right, welcome everyone to our February 6th Justice Resource Advisory Council meeting. Today should not be a particularly long one, but really important in some ways. We'll call it to order and go ahead and do the roll call. And this will be the last time that we do it in this format because we are going to have some shifts around who is serving in the best way, but hopefully we'll talk about that during the bylaws section. So I will go ahead and name you, and if you're replacing someone here today, just correct me. Sybil Tate. Regina? Here. Oscar? Here. Sylvia? Or someone from DJJ? Shalissa McDaniels? Judge Thornburg? Todd, let me know he's not going to be here today. Chief Public Defender Sneed?
Here.
Angie Garner?
Here.
Deputy Chief Arnema?
Here.
Vacant seat, Daniel Conway?
Here.
Maggie Ullman? I think she's-
Here, sorry.
Well done. Michael Gear? Here. Anyone here on behalf of Dustin?
He accepted, so he may be in.
That's good, thank you. Clerk of Court Christie?
Here.
Judge Keppel should be here, just late. David Sweat? Here. Excellent, and honorable guest, Vanessa Conway. Your name's on the sheet, I'm gonna call you.
Additional to here, present in the county court.
I know, I'm messing. Has everyone had a chance to look at the meeting minutes from the last session? If there are no corrections, I'd accept the motion to approve.
So
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. And separately, we did not lock down the 2025 minutes from December, is that right? Or is
We
that
sent
correct,
them out.
Vanessa?
We sent them out.
You sent them out, we just never approved them at the last meeting, or we haven't had one since? We had a special session since,
We have not had another session.
steering committee.
Yes.
Well, as a procedural measure then, let's go ahead and approve the 2025 minutes. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Fantastic. We're gonna do,
Record shows Sam.
I heard Maggie and
Sam.
another voice. Was that you, Sam?
To say what?
You just walked in. No, you just walked in. We just said you just walked in.
Oh, no, Sam was
You
here.
said
No, I left it.
Oh,
I
okay.
left it away.
Strategic plan update. And we were joined by Lee Creighton today to help us ideally round out what we have been working on for the past session or two.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, so hopefully we can finish up the strategic planning that we've been doing, I think the last three meetings. So basically since the fall. I've got a couple of things that we want to get through. And hopefully you all can read these. I am going to read these out loud. But just to kind of refresh everybody with the goals. We'll walk through the goals. I want to confirm with everybody that these goals are goals that you all feel like you can support as a body. And then also too, what we've done is we've kind of put a work group to each of these buckets here. But we want to go a little bit further in terms of identifying who's going to lead, kind of be a part of this work moving forward. And specifically, what we'd like to do is next to this chair, have a member of JRAC's name by that. By staff, we want to have a county staff name by this. And then if there's anybody else, any other entity we need to make sure is involved in these conversations, that we identify that. So assuming we can get through all of that and you all are good with our goals, we will vote and move things forward. So I want to, before we get into kind of reviewing the board, and I do have some specific questions on 3 of the goals that I'd like to get your feedback on. Sybil, do you want to speak a little bit about the role of the chair, kind of how you what's the vision for that role? So that everybody's clear on what, if your name is here, what's the
What are you
ask?
signing up for?
Yeah,
So the way I envision the chair functioning is being the person to make sure that the right people are in the room. It is a commitment of likely going to probably at least a once a month meeting, because the idea is that we are gonna have a quarterly update to this group on what the work groups are doing. So at our next meeting, 3 months from now, each of these staff or chair people will present the progress that they have made on each of these goals. So it's committing to that likely once a month meeting or whatever cadence the group decides, making sure that the right people are in the room and that they're attending those meetings and that they're engaged, and keeping the momentum going towards achieving these goals. So, that may seem like a lot, but I wanna ensure people that the reason we're gonna have a staff assigned to each one is because they're gonna be taking care of kind of the nitty-gritty, the calendar invites, the minutes, the what data needs to be pulled. That's the role of staff. And the chair is really there to keep the discussion on the right path and making sure that the right people are in the room and they're coming to those meetings regularly. So, any questions on that?
So is there a timeline on how long these work groups are going? Is it gonna be like a year?
Well, our strategic plan is a 2-year plan,
Okay, so these work, okay.
potentially. Now, if you're like, oh, we've achieved this goal, check, then you're done. But I think when we talked about the length of the strategic plan, we intentionally chose that 2-year period because we wanted to have very specific goals that we felt were achievable in that timeline. So,
And we're not wanting to create a plan just to create a plan. We really want to be able to have some actionable items that we can see change in the systems.
To that end, not to get ahead of ourselves, but in anticipation of the bylaws going through, if I flag anything that might involve someone being a chair who may otherwise not be on after this meeting, I will flag that for you. I can't tell you not to appoint someone, but might be ill-advised to appoint someone who's rolling off of JRAC. Anyone have any beliefs or thoughts about, do these groups cover everything that we think is essential as a starting place?
yeah, so these buckets look a little bit different than the last time that you saw them, but all of the content is essentially the same. We kind of broke these, we added additional buckets, I think one additional bucket, just to kind of better align it with an existing work group. So let's talk through what we've got up here. So in the behavioral health bucket, this is work that we envision happening under the umbrella of the BHJC, the Behavioral Health Justice Collaborative. We've got right now 2 goals listed here. One is reviewing the law enforcement utilization of the behavioral health urgent care data and provide recommendations for expanding usage. And then we've got the second goal to review inpatient treatment bed capacity data and provide recommendations for expansion of beds. So any concern with these 2 goals as they are currently up on the, is there any?
Did you guys send these to us in writing? I've looked a couple times.
I don't know that we've sent them out in writing.
No.
Any concern with these?
In what way, Lee?
Just in terms of, can JRAC support this work moving forward over the next 2 years? Is this something that you all see as important to address and a priority that you would like to see?
Is the assumption that we need more beds? It just sounds like you're just gathering data to prove we need more beds.
I think it's about
Reads.
expanding the usage as well as what the resources that we have. Victoria, Mike can speak. This is something that came out of the sequential intersect mapping process.
It was, I think, there's a couple layers. And as you all know, things are constantly changing. I think we need to dig in a little bit more to get more specific. I think the incompetency to proceed is kind of a barrier. And then what we're seeing now with Ariana's law, not seeing as many people getting referred to treatment providers. And so now there's treatment beds available, but they're not accessing them. So, like, you know, how things just, you set one goal and then another law comes into play and things evolve. I think, again, we need to look at that. It might change more of like, how do we have accessible beds, or how do we make treatment accessible? And so there's so many different options on what we might want to look at. So I think having something of like what our if anything, I would maybe change it to how do we increase access to treatment beds? And then we're able to look at what type of beds, what are the barriers, and what are creative opportunities versus let's just create beds. And it gives us flexibility as policies and things change to be able to evolve with that.
Can you read them both one more time?
Yeah, so review law enforcement utilization of the behavioral health urgent care and provide, it says data here, and provide recommendations for expanding usage. So essentially, how can we ensure that law enforcement are using these resources in the most effective way? And then the goal is here around inpatient treatment bed, look at that review inpatient treatment bed capacity data and provide recommendations for expansion of beds, or maybe it's access to beds, existing beds.
Is the first part just specifically RHA's BHUC? Like, is that what it's referencing, or is there more than one behavioral health urgent care that
It's just,
That is the
That's
only,
just
one.
yeah, and
is RHA involved in this group? Because it feels like they would be an important person to have. in
They
this
are
group.
involved,
Yeah.
we're having active conversations and we do meet with them.
Awesome, okay.
So just for complete clarity, the BHJC has been doing almost exactly this work without the strictures enumerated as concisely there, but that's the organization that also houses our crisis intervention steering committee, which also informs that work, and that's where some of the recommendations that Victoria mentioned came from law enforcement via RHA, any number of partners, some of whom are in this room, but a good number of folks who just have not been here are providing us these general objectives.
any other questions on these?
I hope it's not too redundant, but just to mention that I think we came up with these suggestions out of other plans that we've worked on, because the data that we gathered from jail data last, I think it was back in when Matt Baker did the presentation here, and he, you know, showed us there's a lot of mental health need, there's a lot of just need for housing in general. So implementing, you know, beds, people kind of where we were going with that.
All right,
And one thing I want to mention about the BHUC, what I think, right, what's the overarching intent is we want to increase utilization and capacity of services to be a point of diversion for LEO. And I think that's a service that we have in our community. And I know the BHUC is dedicated to really working with law enforcement. Jana McJunkin, the director, was able to attend all the roll calls with APD to really talk about that, giving her own cell phone for any issues to call, but also a direct line that officers can call when they're not sure. Is this the right thing? Should I go there? Is it going to need to be the hospital anyway? So I think that's continuing to help support. There's also some really great coordination with AFD Rest and again, opportunities with even global crisis, and how do we make sure that folks that could get a different outcome is able to access those resources that we have now, but also understanding what are then the gaps for some of those needs that maybe are not currently being met. So just to kind of, I feel like that's the bigger picture, but this is kind of more specific of what's the resource we have in our community, how can we make sure we're leveraging it appropriately, and what is it not able to do potentially, and what do we need it to do, or what else is needed to be a diversion point.
And the specifics I'm hearing is that it's around law enforcement explicitly, that we see that opportunity, or we have a question of if that intervention point is leveraged enough.
Yes. Yep.
I guess, I mean, it's part of the issue also is there's been legal changes in North Carolina Whereas if somebody winds up in jail, it's really hard for them to get out. And so increasing to the max our ability to divert prevents them from getting stuck in a place they can't get out of. So,
And I will say, back to the BHUC data real quick with law enforcement, we do have that data. That data has to be submitted to VIA and to state. And we've started to disseminate the drop-off data. We just started in January between law enforcement, so between the sheriff's office, between APD and other law enforcement agencies and other counties as well. Now, just to say, Buncombe County in general as a whole utilizes the BHUC high 80%.
Yeah.
There's 2% here and there, Henderson, Transylvania, Polk maybe, but Buncombe County overall is the high 80% utilizer of the BHUC. And we're starting to look at what the drop off is from each law enforcement agency. So just to let you know.
And overall, it's like close to 300 a month of individuals going to the BHUC. So it's not that it's not being used. We just want to make sure that it's a point of option for law enforcement to use.
Another question. I understand that JRAC, soon to be JRCC, is the kind of umbrella container for all age groups and services. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So youth is included in this plan, or do they have a separate plan with JCPC?
It's not technically included. It's not something we're blind to, but the JCPC has exercised the most jurisdiction over the number of programs that serve, and they're not quite interconnected yet. I think that's a good long-term goal for us to do, but I wanted to make sure we have our adult offender response, community response in order before messing with something that I think is working very well in some ways over there.
And we have discussed, and it's one of the ones that I have additional questions for you all about. We have discussed an inclusion of a juvenile justice goal. And it is looking at juvenile detention data and looking at strategies to reduce juvenile detention costs. One of the things I think we talked about last time was that's how much control over that do we as JRAC really have, right? So the question is this something that you all want to kind of explore, knowing that we might find out there's not much that could be done? Does it even fit within the strategic plan? So there is a goal that speaks to juvenile justice, but there are some questions about whether this is something that we feel like can be addressed.
And I'll note too, in the bylaws, the updated bylaws that we're getting ready to talk about, we do say that one of the objectives of this group is to look across juvenile and adult justice systems. So as we're talking, if we decide we want to change that language, today is the day to do that.
Quick question, just logistical. So maybe help me answer Councilwoman Holman's question. The other members, does that solely have to be a member of JRAC?
Yeah. Who's involved?
For committees,
Yeah.
they don't have to, they can
It could
be
be.
Because
other people.
I have like the perfect person for that, and it's not me.
Yeah, that's great, yeah.
The only thing, I think it's in the new bylaws, it speaks to at least one JREC member would be on, not necessarily working with.
And ideally, that JRAC member name is right here
It's
next
the
to the
chair.
chair.
Yeah, I did not say that in my, but yes,
Okay.
that's the way I was thinking. The JRAC member would be the chair. And then the other members are people who can make decisions in the meeting. So it's not, it's not like, someone, on the front line. It's someone who can actually make some decisions.
So just circling back here to these two goals, do we have a consensus to include and move forward with these? Anybody want to say no? Hearing no objection, I'm gonna actually keep us going just to review the goals that are up here so that everybody has a full sense of what we're talking about before we start putting names up, okay? Community engagement, there is a community engagement work group. I'm not sure who the chair has, or who the tie between JRAC and the community engagement work group has been most recently. But under this,
Has been staff person, Brett Bailey.
Brett Bailey.
is doing that as well.
Yeah, so this was, the goal here under this community engagement bucket is to essentially look at the kind of the scope of the strategic plan and the things that, the work that JRAC is prioritizing.
Got it.
It's Friday.
Take your time, big doctor.
And looking at ways that we can engage people with lived experience within this work. So that is work that we would put to the community engagement work group. Any concerns or questions about that? Is that something that you all as JRAC think is a priority that we need to support in the next 2 years?
I think it makes sense. We always solicit community engagement, but there have been specific moments over the past 2 years that we have not had a formal structure for elevating the feedback that we got through that group for many reasons, including a shift federally, but I think now's a good time to do this as we're gonna make changes.
And I'll note too, in our bylaws, the updated membership list has a spot for an individual with lived experience, so decision point later.
That's how I got here. Thanks for having me. Been working in that group for a few years. And we're on a little bit of a pause right now because structure is essential to really navigating a clear direction forward. Strong leadership in that, and I don't want to be the leader. But no thanks.
Turns out when you talk, you have to be the leader, so.
This happens frequently. I find myself in this room.
Thank you for accepting.
So Lee, I think the only thing, it's minor, it's sort of minor, but the way that's framed is make recommendations to get people engaged. And the measure is just how many people are engaged. It doesn't have a, I don't know, it's not driving more beyond just having them here.
Right.
Right, and so I don't know.
Is there a measure you want to put on the table?
That's the problem.
That's the problem, right?
But I'm like, so the value of getting someone with lived experience engaged is to make sure that we are learning from their experience and what? I mean, like where are what is the specific value add we believe, and I believe it is important to have them here, but what's the specific value add they bring is my question. Is there a way to articulate what that is?
So I think that what came up last conversation during this, for the portion that I was able to re-listen to, was two things converged. One, wanting to have a clear number that we can attribute to a goal, right? To answer your question, probably the more important part being, are the recommendations that we're offering and the work that we're doing informed by the people who are most impacted by it?
Yeah.
And that's such an intangible, because it depends largely on what those groups do, right? So if it ends up being the VHUC, then that's gonna be one thing. If it comes out that law enforcement makes another recommendation, whether or not we engaged with people with lived experience and what their interactions were, whatever that may look like. So it's kind of nebulous, I think, kind of by design, but I don't know if that's acceptable for a strategic plan at this point, but I don't really know how to best capture community engagement's role until we know what the work is we're doing. Am I thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard, how are people actually engaged is, I mean, I would hope that you would see, a more kind of, and like whatever the language might be, but what we would often call like more like trauma informed, right? System, right? Like something that's more kind of aligned and understanding of the experiences that the people who walk through these paths like are walking. So it's just, but how do we measure that is a little bit of a different beast. I do think this is the first kind of relaunch of a JRAC strategic plan. It's a 2-year plan. I think that this is setting the stage in a lot of ways. The way these goals are written are setting the stage for probably work that is going to need to continue for, beyond the life of this strategic plan. And in its next iteration, maybe we have some really tangible ways that we're gonna engage people.
Right, if we're gonna have a specific work group of these folks that have lived experience, it might make sense to say when we're making recommendations from all the work groups that it filters through there for their input.
Yeah, that's a great way to.
So maybe it's number of recommendations reviewed by individuals
By,
with
with,
the
to get their
experience.
input.
Right, okay, yeah, that makes sense, that's where my brain was going to. Right, recommendation.
Well, I mean, it gives a purpose of the work group. Like,
Yeah.
what's the purpose of the work group?
Because the way it's worded, it's in the bylaws, so we kind of have that involvement, but you
Yeah.
make a very, very good point.
Yeah, because each of these work groups are gonna come up with recommendations, and so to David's point, there is a point in that recommendation process where they're reviewed and inputs given by those with lived experience. Okay.
And the lived experience, I also have to say, could be survivors, okay? So.
Sure.
Okay. Any other feedback questions on this goal? We good? Anybody want to say no? Okay. This is a new bucket. We kind of pulled this out because it is falls within the coordinated community response work group. And it is specific to domestic violence and sexual assault. And here we have explore a protocol for connecting offenders to services in domestic violence incidents when a primary aggressor is identified at the scene. This is a finding a recommendation that came out of the most recent domestic violence fatality review team. Looking to basically bolster the number of referrals to domestic violence offender services in the community. April.
I just have a question about the goal. It seems like there's focus on serving offenders, but there's no mention of serving victims.
Mhm.
And so I wondered what the logic was that went into investing in offender services and not investing in victim services. I guess I have two questions. The second question was that a big recommendation out of the last fatality review team was to begin a high-risk team. And that work is already underway, and MOU has already been signed. And that's a way to really sort of focus in on offenders who are at higher risk of committing homicide. And it seems like maybe an oversight not to reflect that part of the work of the FRT as well.
Well, the discussion for this was that when law enforcement interacts with a domestic violence situation, they are recommending victims to the FJC, but there's no protocol for what to do for who they designate as the primary offender. So there already are protocols in place for how to direct victims, but there weren't any protocols in place for how to direct offenders towards services.
I don't understand why that protocol wouldn't be arrest.
So just arrest them and don't offer them any services on how to get better?
Well, from the crime scene, you probably don't want to offer services, right? At the crime scene, you want to calm what's going on and stop the danger, which would be arrest. It seems like when somebody is in jail or in the prosecution chain, that might be a time to offer additional services.
And I do remember Judge Keppel was talking about that she would urge law enforcement not to get involved in that kind of, at that point, to try to just legally, if you could open up things. I can't remember the detail.
Yeah, but just to answer your first question, like, is it oversight? So all of these priorities, the process that's starting back in the fall, we've sent a survey to solicit feedback from JRAT membership on priorities. We provided a number for them to respond to, but also asked for them. We also did that in the first facilitation. This one's just happened to be the one that stuck around, and there's something that high-risk team didn't come up for the people in the room at the time. And so, that's just how we got here. If there's a JRAT for somebody kind of if we're talking about making a change, that's that's fine if that's what the body wants to do.
Just process wise, I would guess that part of why that happened was because CCRT hasn't met in quite a long time. So there wasn't like a robust pipeline for that.
But we did want to get, yeah, go ahead.
No, so didn't y'all have a
Not a
last
CC,
year?
not a CCR.
Oh, no,
So
but I said a DVRT.
The
There
other
was a
issue
DVF.
we've got here is if you're referring somebody into like an offender management or a batterer intervention program from the crime scene, there's no tracking mechanism because there's no court involvement.
It doesn't specify from the crime scene though. That's not one of the
But if law
goals.
enforcement is doing it, it is. Whereas if the district attorney does that or a judge.
Okay, well, the goal
orders that-
doesn't say that. I'm just saying that's how we got to the goal in the discussion. The goal does not say
Yeah, it
law
doesn't say law
enforcement
enforcement.
recommending offender services. It says protocols for connecting offenders to services. So I'm saying that the initial discussion was about how law enforcement can connect victims immediately with the FJC, but then we see this lag in time and services for the identified offender at the scene. So the goal does not say anything about law enforcement connecting offenders to the programs, just that how do we get offenders connected to these programs
At some point.
at some point in the process.
That's a judicial order. We have that mechanism.
But
So just-
prior to a conviction, or if it's dismissed, if someone comes in and dismissed it, the judge has no jurisdiction anymore.
So let's do this because I don't see these as mutually exclusive things. So my concern would be, since we haven't had a real CCRT meeting for the better part of
What
a
is
year.
CCRT?
Coordinated Community Response, the acronym for the work group's name.
Thank you.
Since we have not had this group's meeting for a while, it seems ill-advised to not be open-minded about what the goals could be. If there's some group that's been meeting that I don't know about, or if there's been some work that I don't have in front of me, I don't want to discount that. What I would propose we do is say, maybe make one of their goals to identify victim support services and FJC integration, whatever language would suit what you're raising best. I don't think those things would have to be inconsistent with each other, but I don't think that I'd be well-equipped to figure out what that is, so maybe task them with the work of figuring out what our DV goals are. That seems like a fair place to start, and we can modify it, but.
Yeah, we do have another one that's a domestic violence, sexual assault. It's kind of big and broad, but maybe it's a placeholder. And so what it is, and this is one that I had a specific question for you all about because of how kind of broad it is. Review domestic violence, sexual assault data with partners and recommend strategies to reduce domestic violence and sexual assault. So that's kind of the other end of, right, on the other side of things. If this is something that, I guess the question to JRAC, do we feel like this at least gives the coordinated community response and chair and staff enough direction to have conversations about how can we better address, support domestic violence, sexual assault survivors in our community, as well as
Prevent future assault.
prevent.
I mean, I think as a data person, I think if the work group is dormant, start saying, look, get together, review the data, and give us recommendations on how you think this could be intervened upon, is not a bad place to start. It just propels the group to start meeting again and say, start with looking at the data and then figure out what you think the best recommendations are based on your analysis.
Bring it back to the
And
group,
bring it back.
because I think there's argument on both sides, with connecting offender services, as well as perhaps some of the others. So I think that's a good idea to really look at the data and see what drives us best. Which direction, and maybe both, maybe you could have, addressing both.
So do we want to keep both on here, or we want to just move forward with a broader one that the group can then
Well,
take?
I think it's a good idea as well, because I'm not a part of the CCR, but for them to go ahead and get information from the DVFRT, so we're all well informed here. I mean, I sit on the DVFRT, but I am I'm not gonna say anything. It's been a while, and I thought that CCR handled that piece. So I think we should wait to hear from CCR. Should they meet from the recommendations from DBFRT, I feel before.
But I think it would be
Be well
easy
informed.
enough to modify the goal on the left to where it doesn't just say connecting offenders, but say also victims. Or, you know, like.
Not
So,
in place of, but in addition to.
right, it's both. It's both and.
I want to add here that I started advocating for this 14 years ago. And when I saw this on an agenda a while back, I had a lot of relief to see that it's being addressed, because in the past, what we've seen is just repeat offense, back into the community, repeat offense, hurt someone else, repeat offense, hurt someone else. We need to do this. This is another moment where I will say flowcharts can help us learn how to create a protocol that can work for everyone. Because the offender, in a way, is just as much a victim of their own proclivity. And without addressing that, that's a healthcare need. Without addressing that, our entire public health is at risk.
All right, so I've made an edit here to just make it explore protocol for explore or maybe review. Because we have a lap protocol, a protocol for connecting offenders and victims in domestic violence incidents to services.
Leah, this may be counterproductive, but I'm hoping it's somewhat helpful. Is it possible on the back end of us finishing this process, allowing each work group to dig into their goals and decide if they're right, and then bring them back with an opportunity to modify, tweak, change language? Because I really don't see us.
I think that's a great, just especially because we have work groups that haven't met for a while, right? That might be a great step. Some of them we gotta create, right? Okay, so are we good here with these two, this modification and this addition?
Yes, and I would be remiss if I did not say, I wanna make sure that the sexual assault's not silent, right? And so the first one is
Specific
to domestic violence, and I think that that's fine and appropriate. But I wanna make sure that as we're creating goals, we are being very explicit, and sexual assault is gonna be a different dynamic, and we need to put attention on it.
Okay,
What a good conversation.
yeah, thanks you all
It's really made it better.
for this feedback and discussion. Okay, courts. So under the court bucket, there is not a work group. We do not have currently a court work group. So that's something that we need to look into establishing. Under here, we have review and recommend programs to facilitate implementation of a mental health / wellness alternative to incarceration. We have review, arrest, and court data by a number of factors and develop recommendations to reduce disparities. And then we have create standards for case processing. These are the three that we have currently under courts. Any feedback on any of these?
When we say
Questions?
standards for case processing, what does that mean? Do we know?
That's a good question.
I think it centers around reducing the case, the length of how long it's taken.
I would say instead of standards, can we say guidelines? Because the judges will blow a gasket if you tell them there are standards for case processing. Okay, for noticing my brilliance, Regina, for once.
Does this seem like?
A lot?
Yeah, like those are like, I want all of these things, and
But
do we have space to prioritize? Is that even worthwhile?
Well,
Maybe.
keep in mind, these are recommendations.
Yeah.
So I think, and this is kind of new. It's up to you all, but be too much, maybe.
There's also downward pressure from the state with the Arenas law.
Right.
To start looking into involuntary commitments. And Judge Keppel is working on a mental health court. And, it's very difficult to get the state legislature to have buy-in to the laws that they've created. But I think that particular thing is, since they put a big emphasis on the court system, addressing this at first appearance and that we have to do something to deal with it structurally.
That's kind of on a roll.
Hmm?
That's kind of.
It's a mandate and we have to look at this and because we know that we have pressure already on the jail population with the changes in the laws. So.
Yeah, I think it is a lot, but perhaps it could be like, this is what the full JRAC or whatever we're about to be called is interested in, but then it's up to the work group to decide how to prioritize that, I guess.
And looking at all of the parameters, because maybe their recommendation is something, an alternative to a court. Courts can be costly or whatever. Maybe there's some other things that may work. I don't know. That's gonna be the mindset of the.
We're also shifting. This is not starting from zero because we've already been doing work with Judge Keppel and BHJC to create the mental health court. So it's just taking the things that we're already doing and moving that into a different pot. If you want it in courts instead of behavioral health, like it's fine, it doesn't really matter. But in terms of the net goal, if we're 70% of the way, we're 70%.
And it's really looking at our system, and where we're fragile, where we need to make some recommendations for improvement. It's really giving us a holistic view of the system, really.
Any good, everybody good with these? All right, last bucket, law enforcement. Again, we do not have a work group. That's something that we'll need to establish. Right here, right now, I've got one goal. I have a second goal that I want to check in with you all about. This first goal is develop the process to facilitate the implementation of a law enforcement assisted diversion program. Any comments, questions, concerns about that one?
I just stepped out during the last meeting, but I think Chief Ardeman, it feels ill-advised to start with anyone other than a sworn law enforcement officer in the room.
Yeah.
Is that a goal that y'all are in support of or capable of?
I will say right now, we have a lot of concerns.
Okay.
And a lot of questions we would need to have answered. And it would take a pretty extensive amount of policy development and training to implement. You're talking
Well, that's the whole point of this is. to
yeah,
get
I'm
those-
not necessarily opposed to the goal. I'm just saying, having attended that webinar left us frankly with more concerns and questions than we had going into.
Can you explain to me how basically that is not an umbrella for behavioral health, the first goal? Or like how the first goal under the one on the left doesn't?
Because it may not be necessarily someone who's dealing with behavioral health. It's alternatives to arrest.
I know, but I'm just saying that seems like it should be actually underneath the lead, this, that it.
They do kind of.
Yeah, there's definitely.
Specific,
There's definitely relationship. I think the idea of putting it here with law enforcement is it's got to kind of self-organize within law enforcement with pulling in the services in the community, right? Is my kind of understanding of why situating in a law enforcement
That's
makes
law
sense.
enforcement led primarily.
Okay.
This one is.
I just don't know if I fully understand it. So this is kind of taking the stance that right now law enforcement, how to not load this. I don't really understand what this is trying to say. Like, what are we diverting? Is this just saying like right now, and Artema would allow me to be like frank or crass, like police just arrest people and like,
Right.
that's not what we want to do anymore. So we want to figure out to have more proactive relationships. And what Artema's saying is like, that's a whole different part of policing and that's a whole new thing. And so this is kind of saying we want to really open up the law enforcement dynamic to have things like LEAP. It's like that big of an idea, or am I like missing, I could be out of water here.
You just made a good statement to me and probably worth sharing, but it kind of interferes with puts a lot of open and vague stuff out on the street to the law enforcement officers that are enforcing this, and you can probably identify it best. But I think what he was trying to say is basically they're sworn to do certain things, right? And some of the other you know, diversions should take place after. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that interaction.
Like
Yeah.
they aren't the judge.
Yeah, no, and law enforcement have discretion, in most cases.
But you say that, and we talked about it earlier, like sometimes we do, sometimes we
Right.
don't. It's a lot more nuanced than I catch somebody with a felony amount of drugs and I can just
Well,
let them go.
Well, no, but
Like,
that's not what
that's-
LEAD really is.
Well, the
It's-
webinar that kind of, they talked about that
It's,
quite a bit.
well, it's gonna be here in, for me, in my research in LEADS and having done diversion programming. LEADS has been around for many years now, 'cause it started out in Seattle somewhere else. And, but what it is, it's those, it's not your high-level offenses. You're not bringing people with cocaine and those, you're not diverting those individuals. These are more like your lower level, people who are unhoused, people who are repeat. How do we divert them from the system when we know there are other elements that's creating that? This is an opportunity for law enforcement to come together and talk about that systemically across the county and come up with how that works for Buncombe County.
Yeah.
That's what this begins to do. It's not saying this is what we're going to do. It's begin this having that discussion. If we could do something like that, what would work, what wouldn't work? And then coming up with what could work for the county to divert rather than putting people in jail who have some of these other underlying issues that's creating the recycle of
But to your-
recidivism.
But to your point, it's more focused on things like misdemeanor,
Right.
Yeah.
minors.
Again, the webinar
Can we-
is so.
Do we,
fun.
go ahead.
Something that comes to mind for me is like, and it's like a funny spin on lived experience, like, when you talk about this argument, like really helps me, right? Like, your experience as a law enforcement officer saying like, I see some flags or some concerns about this, like, we should listen to that, we should understand. And what I like about JRAC is we're trying to look at the whole system and go like, we don't want people in jail, we wanna figure out bigger system stuff. But I wonder if just some subtle reframing of that goal would be helpful, cause I just feel like there's more exploration and learning. Like, I'm sitting here going like, we've talked about this in a couple strategic plans and I still don't know exactly what it means, and that's my fault for not really being in your sector as much. But if there's, it's just a little bit broader so that we can have
comfortable with-
relationship.
Yeah, I
I
would
would
say,
be comfortable with explore,
Right.
research,
yeah,
how LEAD could be implemented.
yeah.
So
Because
if
that's
we
basically
change
what
to
we're talking
Yeah,
explore.
that's what I'm hearing you say, is like, we need to learn together because y'all's perspective on it, isn't
Learn
necessarily the
before
same.
implementing,
Yeah,
so
like
we can
work
do
together.
it right.
Yes.
Leave here.
Because you can't, because, and the reality of it is you can't implement without law enforcement's buy-in and participation. It's no program without it.
Yeah.
So, that's really the first point is deciding who's interested first. And then if you're interested, what are our next steps?
And I think by it being collaborative, then we can just have more understanding across each other. And so what they did in Seattle might just really not match here. And so it's like, well,
You have different statutes,
Yes.
like
Yeah,
it's,
exactly.
it's pretty complex.
You're gonna have to make it match your jurisdiction.
Right.
There's certain things that won't work because of legislation and the like, you're right. And that's where the whole, you're still gonna follow certain tenets of the program that you wanna ensure happens, but there are certain things have to be adapted to your climate and
Yeah.
and your, and that's what this is gonna be all about.
So does this edit make everybody comfortable pursuing this as a goal over the next 2 years?
I want to
I
pause
do-
the conversation before you even get that far.
Sure.
This law enforcement group is so far out of my depth in terms of having a badge that I want it to be led by law enforcement. And right now, we don't even have one of our primary law enforcement agencies here. So I'm all for this as a good exploratory goal. I think it makes sense to explore whatever APD and the sheriff decide is best for our community in that vein is fine by me. But as long as we just recenter and say, when we put the chairs for this position, ideally someone is chairing or co-chairing with.
This whole work group has to be law.
Law enforcement.
And that's fine, because I just don't even wanna go too far in the conversation without including one of the bodies that is
Yeah, and I spoke with the sheriff. There's something on their site that they do lead, so I don't,
I spoke with the sheriff about it this week.
yeah, okay.
I just want everyone to be present in the room before we go down this
I
route.
also feel like what you were bringing up, Dean Marie, it just took me a minute to kind of catch up with how you were reading it. Like, I do see what we're talking about with the first goal as an example of this. And so I wonder, I mean, sometimes it's just hard to take on a big concept like there's momentum, there's the right partners in the room on that. Like, I don't know if, I'm not trying to say get rid of that. They live together and having them as two separate conversations might not be useful, especially when there's like an actual specific practical one that's a target audience. There might be some merging of these where it's like, we want to explore these concepts and the first target audience we're gonna play with is over in the behavioral health side. I don't know if that's compressing too much of strategy that you all have been working on or not, or if it's just too much of a different can of worms.
I think that's kind of why I want to pause and even setting this as a firm goal, because ultimately, if the sheriff and police chief decide that they have a third goal that we haven't even talked about, I still want that to be housed in the law enforcement group. If we decide that a LEADS program fits better in the behavioral health space, that makes perfect sense to me. They might even tell you that same thing. Let's just have a space where we can address the public safety issues at like the officer level work group and let them decide to some degree what that's going to look like. This is a good starting place. It's a great idea. I don't want to lead that conversation. I think that for logistics reasons, we can't even tell the sheriff what to do, right? He's an elected official who's able to do his own thing, who he sends is his business. Same for the police chief to some degree operating the city council. Can we kind of asterisk on whatever goal we set here and then say we'll re-examine after we have our key partners sitting at the table offering input on that?
I wanna put an asterisk on courts too, cause we're all independently elected officials who can't be told what to do by y'all, so we'll put that same asterisk on the courts one.
That's perfectly fine. None of those have any desire to tell you what to do on that one. I think that's why that became Explore, and this one is offering data to the courts to decide what they want to do.
The one thing I would say though, that is a little different between this group and that group over there, you're talking about the sheriff, police chiefs, I mean like high level people. This group over here, you're talking a lot more like, it's a different level of people.
Like foot patrol?
Yeah, well, not,
Or like.
No, what I would say, thank you for bringing that, because I was gonna say, because I can see how it would be confusing, right? If you come here like, what? So the behavioral health piece, that's more of, that's behavioral health funding. That, we're able to look at how can we make this work in the behavioral health arena. And so that's sort of our purview, right? And then we'll work in liaison with law enforcement and others. So that's that piece. So then the law enforcement is law enforcement led. So what we could do is come in and work with them, whatever they want to implement, to work with the behavioral health piece and how can we increase referrals and do that. But that definitely is separate at this point right now because that's specifically funding policy, procedure, agency, law enforcement. Behavioral health is working with all these other, makes sense.
Also, as of December 1st of 2025, the legislature took away the discretion of the court system to discharge or to defer low-level offenders, a whole population of low-level offenders. They must stay in jail under a secured bond. So we can either work on bonding them out, somehow paying their bond, or we can talk with other group, since discretion's been taken away from the court system, right? Then that's, I think, one of the reasons that led to figuring out some diversion, because once that person's taken right in front of the magistrate, it's a vacuum cleaner to the jail and they're stuck. So we have to, and we are working within the court system to carve out time to get those folks dealt with separate and apart, those folks, the low-level offenders who are in custody, to deal with them, to get them out of custody and either on probation or wherever, dismissal or whatever, just resolve their cases. And this whole system, because a lot of those low-level offenders are behavioral health. They're folks that need behavioral health, and the community needs to be educated about these folks and how to deal with them, right? And there's a mental health court that we're creating to try to deal with them. So I think so much of it is going to be diverted to this population of people, right, that we don't really need in the jail. It saves the county money. anyway, so there's just, I think that we have to focus on that because it's so costly not to.
So I've got this one, this kind of work group is kind of a question, right? We need to continue to kind of think about this and the lead specific goal. The last goal I want to check in with you all about, because I know we're past our time, is we have a co-responder goal. And so the question that I have is, where does this goal fit? I'm gonna read it out. It's identify additional co-responder resources and make recommendations to address barriers to expansion.
You can put a check on
You can put a check on that one. Are you good with that one?
Oh, it's,
Smiling, I'm liking it.
You good with that?
so we're in discussions right now.
Now, so the question is,
Housed already under BHJC right now, with this crisis intervention steering committee. Whether folks want to see it move to law enforcement is up to you, but all the people who are in that room.
that need to be in the room are in that room.
are in that room.
So just real quick on that, here's the good news on co-response. It's already up and going. This is the low hanging fruit. We don't have to develop this. We have some behavioral health funding for RHA, not law enforcement. But we already have it going with the sheriff's office. We're in talks with APD, AFD, and maybe some others with the county. So we can put that under behavioral health because we have behavioral health funding for that. And we're already liaisoning with our law enforcement to figure out how can we work that with them.
Great.
Okay,
Other goals that we're gonna change.
Thank you to Artima for
is there anything else that we need to talk about what's on these boards? Because the next step that I heard, Commissioner, correct me if I'm wrong, but get these work groups up and going, having some discussion, give them an opportunity to have some input on these
And bring it back
and bring them back
for final.
for final thumbs up.
You're gonna appoint chairs?
Well, I'm going to volunteer people.
Okay.
Well, the other option, we can do that when we come back because maybe some of these come off the table, right?
As long as we assign a staff member who's gonna follow up the call
Okay.
meeting, because I don't wanna leave the meeting.
Yeah, I know.
I can, yeah, Regina and I can
But we
work on
just
that
need to,
offline.
I just wanna know what, we're gonna keep these for right now and we'll convene folks interested.
We don't really know who those folks who would be interested unless we just send it to everybody. So do you want to just send it to everybody and say, show it to the one you want, or can we try to parse that out a little bit based on interest? Because there are gonna be some people who self-select. If you're interested in BHJC, anyone
Can come
has
to
to be on that committee. Because I talked to to City Councilwoman Allman about that one. I think it'd be helpful for city and county to both be in the same room there.
Yeah.
Victoria, you are already presently serving in that role unless you want to quit, which I'll make you do publicly. Maybe you can consider being staff, no pressure.
Who's the chair?
Can I
Sounds like Angela should be the chair.
Oh, she's
She
been a
told me
chair
not to
for,
volunteer.
she's a chair on a lot of things right now, even outside of Buncombe County, so I don't know if it would be good.
Actually, one of the
At a
chairs.
policy level.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, Brent's on this one already. So Brent Bailey, Hannah.
I think
is this one?
wasn't she,
Let's just roll through whatever is easiest for
Yeah.
you first, and we'll come back.
weren't you appointed the chair, I thought?
And just know though, Mary is not getting compensated for any of her time being at these meetings, so I think we need to just be cognizant of that she's not in a position where she's employed for any work.
Thank you. I'm open to being employed for you.
14 years later.
Who's the staff for courts, if we do it, if we don't know that?
Oh, I'll, just put me there.
Okay. And then,
Same,
same,
this is all, and we put the pin in. Fix it out.
so we at least have staff. Are there any other JRAC names that we want to put on the post-its at this time?
Is anyone interested in serving as chair? I think the hard part, the reason I'm not as gung ho about this is because our membership is going to change. So some of the people who are going to be on JRAC are not presently able to volunteer themselves as chair right now.
I'll volunteer to chair the course one. I already coordinate meetings with all the judges and Sam and Todd all the time. If that's my only job is to coordinate the meetings, I can do that.
Keep them on task.
But I cannot
Yeah.
promise that.
She's not a magic. Okay.
Let's leave the coordinated community response alone for a few reasons, and I wish I knew a law enforcement officer in the room who could serve as chair of a law enforcement committee. No, we won't put any pressure on.
Oh, I heard it's fine.
I got you.
You gonna
Thank
do
you,
it?
Deputy Chief, I appreciate
Oh,
it.
it's extra, okay.
Okay. All right, any other chairs we want to identify at this point? I think community engagement is the only other one.
CCR.
Oh, the
CCR is also an asterisk for now, let's leave that one alone.
Good.
Is everyone okay with where we stand right now? Perfect.
Who was DLA?
DCA,
WGR.
Oh, okay.
Just
Yeah,
shorthand.
your handwriting is not ideal.
I know, mine's not ideal, so. All right,
Don't blame
it's the
yourself.
printing. Okay, so we will put this together to get to our work groups. We will also distribute it out to membership. Okay, and then next meeting, the goal is to have
Well, in between this meeting and next meeting, we'll try to convene these groups.
these groups and start looking at,
Having some
have final
discussion.
feedback for you all to consider. Okay,
Fantastic.
awesome. Thank you all for this is great. I think there was some really good discussion today on these goals. I really appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thanks,
Creighton.
Lee.
All right, I'm gonna see if I can give you some of your afternoon back by going through this as fast as I can. Vice chair nominations for the second meeting in a row. I feel ill-equipped to do this in someone's absence, but just so y'all are aware, Judge Keppel did offer to volunteer to be vice chair unless anyone had any strong concerns about that. Seems like a great pick, given her name coming up in a lot of this work anyway. I have her permission to do it without her here, but I don't know how y'all feel about that. I don't have to appear in front of her for a while, so I'm fine with it.
Move to vote by acclamation.
Any objection? Fantastic. Bylaws update, as you all have seen, those in the steering committee already know, name change to Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. I think that better reflects the work that we're doing at this point. Justice Resource Advisory Council has been heavily focused on jail population exclusively. We're looking at a more policy-oriented lens and a few structural changes to meet best practice at a nationwide level. Has everyone had a chance to look at the bylaws? Any concerns about what's on there? I'm not going to read it to you.
Oh, I've got notes. Are we talking about now or at another meeting?
Let's talk about them now.
Page 3. The first sentence E, so when we're talking about commitment across juvenile and adult justice systems, so then it leaves a big gaping question of like, what's the purpose of JCPC? How does CCJ, whatever, how do we interact with JCPC? Like if we leave juvenile in there, then that to me sounds like we're getting on JCPC's territory.
JCPC, this group is looking at policy. JCPC is a funding stream, and they also look at program utilization that they fund. So this group is focusing on the system.
And do they ever
They
like
could,
interact
there
with
should
us?
be some, there could probably be some coordination, I would say yes.
Okay, the title of clerk of court is not correct. There's no NC 40th Judicial District Office of Clerk of Superior Court. It's Clerk of Superior Court for the County of Buncombe.
Every client county has a clerk.
Yeah. And then on page 5, since we switched to quarterly meetings instead of every other month, now it says if they fail to attend 50% of the meetings within a 6-month period, then if you go to one, I guess you're 50%, but it doesn't really work with a quarterly system. If there's another way that we wanna, it made sense when we met every other month, I think that, but do you see what I'm saying? Rethink and then why can't they designate an alternate if they can't be here? In part 3 on page 5, why can't the community rep designate an alternate?
Because they're a Board of County Commissioner appointee.
But if they're not gonna be here because they're like out of town, They just can't, they miss that meeting, and then if they break their leg at the next meeting, then they're off the committee.
Well, that's, if it's a board of county it's not like here. It's a board of county commissioner appointed position, so they can't put somebody else in a position that the board of county commissioners put them in. They can't bring, saying, I'm gonna have a designee or an alternate for me.
Okay.
Cause it's like not a department head.
Right, it's not like a.
And then I think I just had one more, and it was a question. What does it mean? Okay, page 11, the first one. A member who has withdrawn from a meeting without being excused by the majority shall be counted as present for purposes of determining whether a quorum. What does that mean?
It means that
Withdrawn.
if you show up, well, if you leave a meeting,
If you leave early.
if you leave early, we don't lose quorum because you left the meeting early, for whatever reason. It's a procedural mechanism to keep someone from stopping a vote. It shows up in most of our committee meetings, but I'm happy to change it if there's a concern.
Maybe clarify the language.
Yeah. I just didn't know what it meant by withdrawn, like if you're,
Yeah, it
Yeah.
means, so basically, if we're gonna vote on something that you had to leave early, you're basically, by leaving early, you're assenting to join the majority. Instead of being able to prevent a vote from occurring.
well, then you just shouldn't show up.
Well,
You'd be surprised how many meetings have stopped because people have
Yeah.
left trying to prevent a vote.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't be voting on things that we aren't aware of before the meeting starts, I guess is why. Just saying. Anyway. Based on the rules of like the agenda and stuff, it's supposed to be presented to all of us. That's all, those are my questions and edit suggestions.
Is you give notice in the minutes before, ahead of time, so that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, we should know. Anyway,
Well, the goal, I think, for us moving forward is to get a lot more
formal.
structured and the like, so that we will have minutes out, we'll get agendas out well in advance, but it's just been problematic here lately, but that's the goal.
That's a goal. Do you want a work group?
You wanna be on my work group? Let's go.
Sounds like it.
Great, well, I appreciate y'all bearing with us through this. The steering committee already had an opportunity to review some of these, hence the good notes coming through and discussion of this. Unless anyone has a strong objection, these bylaws are not hard and fast, it's not that we can't change them, but to give us some structure to prevent us from being in a situation where I do not have a vice chair effectively forcing me to be at every single meeting without dying, which will happen sometime. All in favor of, or give me a motion, please, to get us some bylaws so we can do the damn thing.
Second.
I would like to make it with the edits that I made today, yes.
With the amendments offered and accepted by Clerk of Court Christie and you wanna circulate the final version of it, just so everyone can review?
We'll do that.
We'll give you a week to review it before it's locked in, just in case anyone has issues with any minor wording changes, but otherwise, all in favor? Any opposed? Excellent. All right, this will be the last time that shows up as JRAC, so whoever our media person is, I'm sorry.
You already sent out an invite.
It will.
You're like, what the hell is this? I'm like, oh.
JRAC 2026 meeting schedule or CJCC
Cape on that one.
meeting schedule,
Be real quick.
please.
You guys have a handout. Some people are visual, so I did print handouts. They're over there on the table. So we are going to quarterly JRAC meetings. Our next meeting was supposed to be in April, but we have a holiday in April and then we have spring break right behind that holiday week. So our next meeting is May 1st. Everyone should have the invites already on your calendar. So we have 3 more meetings this year, May, August, and November. So we got a couple months before our next full JRAC meeting. All the meetings will be held here. I do want to mention that today was the last time that we will be providing lunch for the JRAC meeting. You are welcome to bring your lunch with you during the lunch hour. But again, I do have a handout over there if you're visual and want to pick one of those up. And everybody should have your invites, calendar invites, already for these.
Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, statutorily required public comment. I don't see anyone here who isn't either on the committee or has been given an opportunity to speak yet. We'll go ahead and get in touch about every work group so we can meet in between, be ready, make the best use of your time for the few meetings that we have. And otherwise, unless someone has strong objection, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
If you have if anybody wants to be in a work group, let me know, or you know somebody who might be, wanna send their shoot their information, and I'll reach out to them and see if that's something they wanna do, if they be good candidates.
Yeah, I just thought of it.